In 2015, Germany welcomed over 1.1 million refugees and asylum seekers, representing 40% of all asylum seekers arriving in the EU that year. In 2024, that number dropped to around 270,000, which accounts for just 26% of the total number of asylum seekers arriving in the EU. What happened in those 8 years to cause such a dramatic shift?
Here in Berlin, there were clashes during protests spanning Germany's immigration policy.
The fault lines are undermining Angela Merkel's fragile coalition.
The Federal Interior Minister Horst Seehofer wants to bring in a plan which would see the rules regarding immigration revert to what they were in the summer of 2015 before.
In 8 short years, Germany's immigration policy has been reshaped by a complex interplay of factors. And this isn't solely a German story. It's a microcosm of challenges facing democracies worldwide. Today, Germany is extending border controls and toughening asylum rules. From the rise of far-right parties, whose support soared from 4.7% in 2013 to over 25% in some eastern states by 2021, to growing security concerns and economic pressures. Understanding Germany's shift in sentiment and policy will help us better understand a global trend that is emerging, and that is the global increase of migrants and the global decrease of liberal migration policies. In 2015, Germany opened its doors to over 1 million refugees, more than any other European country. This unprecedented move was driven by a complex mix of historical, economic, and humanitarian factors. Germany's post-World War II constitution enshrined the right to asylum, reflecting a commitment to human rights born from the country's dark past. Chancellor Angela Merkel, raised in East Germany, saw parallels between the Syrian refugees and those who had fled communist oppression decades earlier. Germany's aging population and shrinking workforce influenced this welcoming stance. With a birth rate of 1.5 children per woman, and life expectancy reaching 81 years in 2016, the country faced a looming demographic crisis. Economists predicted that an influx of 1.5 million young motivated immigrants could add 38 billion euros to Germany's economy by 2030. Merkel's words,
Wir schaffen das.
"We can do this," encapsulated the optimism of this era. The scale of the influx created significant challenges for German society and infrastructure. By the end of 2015, nearly 600,000 refugees were housed in temporary shelters, including school gymnasiums and repurposed office buildings. The education system struggled to integrate over 300,000 new students, many of whom lacked German language skills. Healthcare services were stretched, with a reported increase of 20% in demand for mental health services, particularly for those traumatized by war and displacement. Integration efforts yielded both successes and challenges. Syrian refugees like Anas Modamani became symbols of successful integration. Learning German and finding employment quickly turned into a notorious media sensation when Anas took a photo of himself with then German Chancellor Angela Merkel. This photo was subsequently used in a right-wing fake news campaign, and the image was misappropriated by various online sources to falsely suggest that Modamani was involved in violent terrorist acts, including the Berlin truck attack in December 2016. This led to significant negative consequences for Mr. Modamani, including threats and harassment. Modamani took legal action against the spread of disinformation and sought to reclaim his identity and narrative in the public eye. His story highlights the broader issues of right-wing disinformation, the challenges faced by German refugees, and the impact of media representation. Simply put, Anas's story serves as a microcosm of the growing xenophobia within Germany. Although over 50% of refugees found jobs within 2 years of arrival, and German businesses facing labour shortages welcomed new arrivals, xenophobia was on the rise. The sudden demographic change led to concerns about cultural differences. Incidents like the 2015 New Year's Eve sexual assaults in Cologne, where some perpetrators were identified as asylum seekers, fueled public anxiety and a rise in anti-immigrant sentiment. Far-right groups seized on these incidents to promote their agenda, leading to a rise in racist rhetoric and, in some cases, violence against refugees and migrant communities. This rhetoric was fueled in part due to Germany's large expenditure on refugee-related costs, which reached approximately 21 billion euros in 2016, putting pressure on public finances in the short term. Quick aside, while we have you here, if you feel like our content is providing you with some value, please feel free to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us immensely. Now, back to the stuff you came in for. As time passed, Germany's stance on immigration began to shift. The initial wave of enthusiasm gave way to a more cautious approach, with the government introducing measures to speed up asylum procedures and facilitate deportations of rejected applicants. The cautious approach to immigration soon gave way to something far more contentious. By 2018, the political landscape in Germany had undergone a significant transformation. The Alternative for Germany, AfD as it's known, the far-right party founded just 5 years earlier, had become a formidable force, polling at 15.5% nationally, and even higher in regions like Saxony, where it reached 27% in some elections. Public discontent with immigration policies and a perception that the government had lost control fueled this rise. The shift in public attitudes towards immigration was dramatic. A 2015 survey by the Pew Research Center found that 53% of Germans viewed immigration as a good thing for the country. Compare that to a 2019 survey, which indicated that 56% of Germans viewed immigration as a burden rather than an opportunity. In 4 short years, the pendulum has swung quite significantly. The AfD capitalized on this shift in attitudes and fears, positioning itself as a defender of traditional German values and advocating for significant reductions in immigration. Their platform included radical proposals, such as entirely abolishing the right to asylum and establishing holding camps for asylum seekers outside Germany. This hardline stance resonated with a growing segment of the population, particularly those in eastern regions. Economic challenges further complicated the situation. By 2022, inflation rates soared to 7.9%, and a labour shortage of 1.9 million workers prompted many citizens to feel that immigrants were competing for limited jobs and social services. The rise of the AfD and the shift in public sentiment had a ripple effect on mainstream politics. Established parties began to adopt more hardline stances on immigration, leading to renewed calls for tougher immigration laws. As the debate intensified, Germany's response was swift and unprecedented. In 2022, the nation once known for its open-door policy implemented some of the most stringent immigration controls in recent history. Key changes included the introduction of temporary border controls at all of Germany's land borders, which allowed authorities greater oversight on who enters the country. Another significant change was the detention of asylum seekers while authorities determined which EU country was responsible for processing their claims. This process, utilizing the Eurodac fingerprint database, helps identify individuals who may have previously applied for asylum in other EU states, preventing asylum shopping. The German government also expanded the grounds for deportation. In 2023, the Orderly Return Law was passed, facilitating expedited deportation. Critics argue that these new policies infringe on asylum seekers' rights and undermine Germany's humanitarian obligations, while supporters claim that they are necessary to restore public confidence in the German immigration system. The implementation of these stricter policies has affected immigration patterns in Germany. After recording high numbers of irregular entries, the country saw asylum applications drop by nearly 30%. This decline suggests that the stricter policies may be influencing potential migrants' decisions to seek refuge in Germany. Germany's Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser, emphasized that these measures aim to limit irregular migration and protect the nation from threats posed by terrorism and serious crime. This rhetoric reflects a broader trend, and Germany's shift has the potential to further influence other EU member states. In 2022, the EU recorded nearly 965,665 asylum applications. a 52.1% increase from the previous year, with countries like Italy, France, and Greece all reporting significant upticks. This continent-wide shift has fueled increasingly stringent border controls and more restrictive asylum policies. Countries like Denmark, Sweden, and Austria have even implemented measures to limit immigration and expedite the return of rejected asylum seekers. Denmark has introduced legislation allowing for offshore processing of asylum claims, while Sweden has tightened rules for family reunification and permanent residency. Austria has increased border controls and reduced benefits for asylum seekers. Motivations behind these policy changes include economic pressures, security concerns, and growing public skepticism towards large-scale immigration. A 2021 Eurobarometer survey found that 63% of EU citizens believed that immigration was a problem for their country. In many cases, mainstream political parties have adopted tougher stances on immigration in response to this shift in public opinion. However, this trend towards stricter policies has not been uniform across the EU. Countries like Spain and Portugal have maintained relatively liberal immigration policies. According to the European Migration Network, Spain and Portugal have consistently ranked among the more open countries, particularly in welcoming skilled migrants. In 2022, Spain introduced a new visa specifically for highly skilled workers, reflecting its strategy to attract talent. The number of work visas issued in Spain increased by approximately 30% from 2020 to 2022, indicating a proactive approach compared to other EU countries. Spain also has one of the highest percentages of foreign-born residents in the EU, with 13.6% of its population being foreign-born, and Portugal's is at 6.3%, which is higher than the EU average of 5.3%. The divergence between countries like Spain and Portugal and nations like Denmark, Sweden, and Germany has led to tensions within the bloc, as countries grapple with balancing national interests against EU-wide commitments to freedom of movement and humanitarian obligations. Greece, Italy, and Malta have long argued that they bear an unfair burden as frontline states for irregular immigration. The introduction of stricter policies in northern European countries has exacerbated these concerns from southern European countries, leading to calls for a more equitable distribution of asylum seekers across the EU. The European Commission has been working on proposals to create a fairer and more effective asylum policy, aiming to address burden sharing among member states and streamline the asylum application process. However, reaching consensus on such sensitive issues has proven difficult, with deep divisions between member states on how to approach immigration and asylum. Germany's new stance is crucial in shaping these continuing discussions. As the EU's largest economy, Germany's shift towards stricter immigration control is likely to influence policy decisions across the continent, potentially leading to a more coordinated approach to managing migration flows, while risking further polarization within the EU. Germany's shift in immigration policy marks a turning point for Europe, challenging the foundations of open borders and free movement. As countries balance humanitarian obligations with domestic concerns, the continent faces a crossroad. The rise of far-right parties could lead to even stricter policies, potentially undermining the EU's commitment to humanitarian protection. The tension between ideals and practicality in managing migration is at the heart of this issue, and Germany's new approach highlights this ever-growing struggle.